Bantamweights looking to put on an impressive performance in the main event this weekend at the UFC's Apex. We have Cory Sandhagen taking on Song Yadong in a great matchup to get us set up for the next three events. And they're all at the UFC's Apex. As always, one half your host and duo, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram, Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. Now, Matt, when it comes to this matchup for Song Yadong, he is on a tidy little 3-fight win streak. And if you look at the guys that he's beaten, increasing levels of competition. 8-1-1 since he debuted in the UFC. And for Song Yadong, he made the move to Team Alpha Male at the age of 19. He's only 24 right now. And he's taking on a guy who's coming off of an interim title loss in Cory Sandhagen, whose last time out was against Petr Yan. Punched Jan's ticket back into another fight with Aljamain Sterling. And unfortunately for Cory Sandhagen, already 0-1 himself against Aljamain Sterling. But if you look at it for Sandhagen, he got that interim title shot off a split decision loss to one TJ Dillashaw. And it's not often that you go from a loss to a title fight, but he was able to do that there. And that was a controversial split decision loss nonetheless to Dillashaw. But Matt, when we look at this fight, bonuses abound for both of these guys. Impressive performances, we know this. Both guys, excellent strikers, but they do it in very different ways. And that was the most fun part to go back and watch tape study on these guys. Because I'd say both of these guys have faced strikers that are similar, and both guys have had pretty good results against those guys as well.
It's really interesting that Song Yadong's trying to get on this level that Cory Sandhagen's been at for a while now. Like, that Aljamain Sterling loss was a number of years ago at this point, and it's really marked ever since then that Cory Sandhagen's been in the top of the division. And yes, they're not all wins, and I hate disagreeing with close decisions. Listen, judges' jobs are very hard. A lot of fights are really close. I don't think Cory Sandhagen did enough to edge it out over TJ Dillashaw, though. Had a knockdown in that fight. I just thought his striking was a little bit more effective as it continued, even though he did give up the takedown a lot in that matchup. And that was the thing about Sandhagen. You always worried about his takedown defense and even some of his grappling defense, because if you go back even far enough to his UFC debut and his early run, he would get into very bad positions on the mat. His toughness would somehow be able to work his way out of it, and then he'd be able to put on his pace, put on his damaging shots that would be able to finish his opposition. But I remember when he fought Yuri Alcantara way back in the day, like, he had him in really bad positions, had him in one of those triangle arm bars where Yuri's just beating the brakes off Cory Sandhagen, but Sandhagen finds a way to work his way out of that. But like you said, Song Yadong's not really a wrestler per se. He is a striker, just in a very different sense than Cory Sandhagen, because Song Yadong's going to use his grappling, or not, he's going to use his hands, use his boxing, and his lightning fast hands. And if I had to give Song Yadong any outlier or any X factor for his skill set, it would be the hand speed that he has for this weight division. And that's a wild thing to say in the bantamweight division, where there's a lot of great boxers and a lot of great fighters with their hands, but Song Yadong's ability to close the range with his feet and with his jabs and combinations is really unlike many other fighters in the division.
And when you watch Song Yadong, one thing that he does that you don't necessarily see all that often in very young fighters is it's cutting the cage and finding his angles and creating his own angles. You look at the finish that he has over Marlon Moraes. He throws an overhand right, a shovel left, and then a right uppercut that ends up dropping him. You watch his fight against Julio Arce, it's the head kick to then punch and drops him, and that's pretty much it with the follow-up. But you look at this matchup, Song Yadong, boxing combinations, does not throw very many kicks. And if he does, he'll throw about, it's always less than 10 in the first round, and then it starts to teeter off as the fight goes on. Now, it opens up his boxing a little bit, and then usually the tide's able to take over. His boxing wins out. The guy's 8-1-1 in the UFC. You look at it in terms of the wrestling, struggled a little bit in some of those exchanges with Stamen, but that's going to happen. It's Stamen.
And that was another one of those weird fights we talked about, another one earlier on in the card, where it was, okay, do you like the control of Cody Stamen because he landed 0 effective strikes in that fight? Or did you like the few significant strikes Song Yadong was able to land before he would get taken down inevitably in every single round of that fight?
And so when looking at all of this, we talk about it. These guys, have they faced, somewhat similar levels of opposition?
I think Sandhagen's faced the much harder.
He's faced the much harder opposition, but just trying to make the comparables out of it. The two that I had written down, Cory Sandhagen's taken on a compact boxer in Petr Yan his last time out, and he took on a very compact boxer in the one championship, now champion, John Lineker in their fight. That was a split decision win for Cory Sandhagen, where the UFC went, hey, tough, I understand, John Lineker. You're 6-2 at bantamweight in the UFC. You're rated near the top of the division. See you later.
John Lineker came this far away from finishing Cory Sandhagen too, guys.
He did, and in that matchup, Lineker's just throwing those power shots, those boxing combinations, trying to rip to the body, where Cory Sandhagen, and the craziest part about it, I was thinking in my head, I don't normally listen to a lot of these fights on tape study with the the volume on. I like to just kind of watch them. I did listen to that one with the volume on. Dominic Cruz is the one that's breaking it down. Do you think Dominic Cruz and Cory Sandhagen are like peas in a pod? Because they, with the footwork, the herky-jerky,
they're cerebral fighters, and I'll leave it at that.
The defense where they're moving their hands, but that was really it. Cory Sandhagen we talked cutting angles on the defensive, not being the tall guy that's leaving his chin up and trying to do the lean back, but leaning back with his hands blocking a lot of those punches.
When he did lean back against Petr Yan, though, he got caught because Yan hit him with an overhand left into a spinning back fist. I know that's not a common technique. I know that's not a common combo. That was able to hurt Sandhagen, and that is the one thing I worry about with Sandhagen at this point in his career. We were talking about this earlier on in the day.
We were talking about the John Lineker fight.
No, there was a fighter that I compared Cory Sandhagen to earlier in the day from a different weight class. I look at Cory Sandhagen at this weight class a lot like I had looked at Dan Hooker in the lightweight division before Dan Hooker had suffered his recent string of losses, to where it was, hey, you're going to be a really hard fight for anybody in the top 5. Like, you're going to push them like they've never been pushed before. But I just don't know how Cory Sandhagen and his style, if it's ever going to be enough to get to that title shot, because we saw against Petr Yan, Cory Sandhagen is as good of a pure striker as you can be. But Petr Yan's just that 5% better with his own natural boxing ability and with his extensive amateur background. I was looking at Sandhagen. He eats a lot of damage. He gives a lot of damage. At a certain point, is that damage going to catch up to him?
And we'll really find that out this weekend. I mean, of course, you can see that. That's what I went with in the thumbnail. A little bit of a damaged Sandhagen, right shot from Song Yadong.
I'm telling you this right now. Song Yadong gets into a rhythm against Cory Sandhagen like Petr Yan was able to in that 3rd or 4th round. I know Song doesn't hit as hard as Petr Yan does, but if he can start putting together his combinations to the body, to the head, and really make Cory Sandhagen think a lot in this fight, that's when we're going to get one of those fight of the year style fights, and that's what I'm predicting for this, above a prediction for either guy. I think this is the fight that we're all going to be talking about at the end of the year when we're filling out our list for fight of the year.
When I look at Cory Sandhagen, you try and put yourself into, okay, well, you got to be in recovery mode. You've lost 2 fights in a row. Doesn't matter how close that TJ Dillashaw fight is. You talked about, does he get into a title shot? He had the title shot his last time out. He loses in that fight. His volume stayed consistent as the fight went on, but he couldn't match the power that was coming back the other way from Petr Yan. When you do look at Sandhagen, throws really good kicks. Not a part of Song Yadong's game. It really isn't. Again, I touched on it. He throws less than 10 in the first round, and then it starts to go down as those fights were on. But when you look at it for Sandhagen, we talked about this for a couple of other fighters. We talked about it as a net positive for Adrian Yanez. We talked about it as a net positive for Ralphie and Stotts over with Bellator. Look at who Cory Sandhagen's trained with in the past. Got those guys ready for their fights. They got him ready for his fight. When you look at it right now, who's Cory Sandhagen training with, or what can you see out there on Instagram? Because he trains out of Colorado. He's got Carrington Banks, and he's got Ryan Hall. Carrington Banks is a pure wrestler in MMA, and a very good one. And Ryan Hall is going to teach you how to get submissions. To me, I think, okay, out of all of this, is it takedowns and submissions? Is that what Cory Sandhagen's going to be searching for in a matchup like this?
If it does, I'm picking Song Yadong.
Really?
Yeah, because this is my whole thing about how if Andre Fili fights his fight like a wrestler, it will lead to his downfall more than anything. Cory Sandhagen, you're one of the great pure strikers we've ever seen in the division. Why do something different than what got you to the dance? I understand those trainers are going to help you refine that process. And yes, Song Yadong has struggled against pure wrestlers in the past. But Cory Sandhagen in a 6-month period cannot make up the difference that a lifetime of wrestling has taught a guy like Cody Stamann. So if Sandhagen does go into this fight thinking, hey, I'm really going to need the takedown, I honestly look at that as a lack of confidence in his own striking, and I don't want that to be the case. He's fighting a guy who's as good on the feet as Song Yadong is.
I think Cory Sandhagen's electric on the ground. I think he already has a good ground game. Those are 2 great guys to get you ready for a matchup like Song Yadong.
I think he's good. I don't know if electric on the ground is where I'd go. I think he's good on the ground, but the fact that he got controlled so much by TJ Dillashaw was very concerning. TJ's a good MMA grappler. But
great, one of the best in this division.
That's a bit of a stretch, and he had a blown knee in that fight too. All I'm saying is, if Cory Sandhagen decides, okay, now I'm something that I haven't been up until this point, I would be a little bit worried. Now, I don't think he is. I think he's using that as a way to help round out his game, but I still think we're seeing a primary striking Cory Sandhagen in this matchup. I like the kicks, not the keys, and I like the check knees of Cory Sandhagen too. That was something Cowboy Cerrone was able to use a lot against Eddie Alvarez when Eddie Alvarez first came over to the UFC. Eddie, a shorter boxer against a taller, rangier kickboxer. You can see the contrast. And Cory Sandhagen, if he does meet Song Yadong with a knee, with an elbow, with some sort of a check attack that prevents Song Yadong from just blatantly rushing in all over, I think Cory Sandhagen is going to really be able to stifle the attack of Song, because that's the thing about Song Yadong. When he does get into that rhythm, it is tough to break him out of it.
It really is, and especially boxers in this division. You know the bantamweight division to be full of fighters that get finishes. We see this time and again every single week. We'll throw it on over to you in the YouTube community tab. Threw this one out there yesterday. 1,200 votes. 74% of you going with Cory Sandhagen, 26% with Song Yadong. Through some of these comments, Matt, the Wretch saying Yadong is really good, but I don't think he's ready for someone like Sandhagen just yet. Bill saying Sandhagen is always my pick because I've seen him in some terrible positions in fights, and he never loses will to win. That makes me think of that fight against Mario Bautista where he's starting to eat some really bad shots, and then he ends up getting the submission win in that one. Mr. Face, not the popular pick, but I'm going with Song Yadong. Let's see, who else? Doug saying great fight, but going with Cory. And we have Benjamin saying, I've got Cory for the win. So people kind of split in the comments, but not so much so with those percentages. 74% with Cory Sandhagen. The overall odds on this fight, Sandhagen open -160, -205 as it stands. Song Yadong open +140, +165. So the fans have Cory Sandhagen. The voters have Cory Sandhagen. Tapology has Cory Sandhagen, are about the same percentage. Do you have Cory Sandhagen here?
I do, even though this is a very dangerous fight for him. And I'm someone who's really believed in Song Yadong from the go. And I rarely believe in 19-year-olds in the UFC because, has 2 worked out for the 50 that haven't? But for Song Yadong, he's always had such a great foundation with his skills, and he's got those physical attributes that you just can't teach. He's got great hand speed, he's got great power, things that you're just sort of born with. And I think this is a great opportunity for Song Yadong to really implant his name into the mind of MMA fans, because if you beat a guy like Cory Sandhagen, only great things are going to happen to you in your career. But unless Song can get it into his boxing range, I think there's a lot of other areas that Cory Sandhagen can win moments at, and that's the thing. If this fight does go late, I think that's really where we're going to learn a lot about Song Yadong, because right now I know he has good cardio for 3 rounds. If we get round 4 and round 5 of Sandhagen versus Song, I've said this many times before, I think this is going to be fight of the night, potentially fight of the year. If we get championship rounds out of these two, this fight's going to be so good. But I do have Cory Sandhagen ever so slightly.
And I mean, if you want to go with Song Yadong, a fight that we didn't really talk about all that much, he does have that win over Chito Marlon Vera, who's all the hotness and whose looks change every different time that they put him on the television.
Wild.
Now he's shaved and he's got a bald head, so who knows what he's going to do next. But a great win in the back pocket for Song Yadong to carry forward in a matchup like this. But again, I do like Cory Sandhagen off of the well-roundedness. You look at Song Yadong where he struggled in some of these fights. The Stamen fight where he struggled with the takedowns. The fight against Kyler Phillips, a longer, rangier, weirder striker who also has the threat of the takedowns. I'm eager to see if that is a part of Cory Sandhagen's game. For me, I think it might end up being. You disagree with me on that one.
I just don't like it when a specialist decides to do something that's not their specialty. They can become very good at that, but they're never going to be the thing that got them to this level in the first place.
To me, I like that well-rounded aspect, and I like some of those submissions that Sandhagen has had in his past and in his back pocket. In addition, against a lot of these power puncher boxers, Petr Yan was able to have success. Song Yadong could as well. In that fight against John Lineker, as close as it was, and you had brought it up, I just did really like the movement of Sandhagen, and I like the fact that from round 1 to round 5, Sandhagen's in there for a fight. So for me, going with Cory Sandhagen, you also have the fighter out of Colorado in this matchup. Let us know in the comments who you have in this fight. Saturday night, Matt, what happens 2 hours before the prelims start?
We have a show called Question Mark Kicks. We like the kicks so much. It's just a chance for us to go through the card one last time. If there was any weight miss, any concerning weight makes potentially, just gives us a chance to go through them, talk about the fights one last time before they happen.
14 total fights as we're broken down here, but there could end up being a fight for Sadiq Yusuff. As soon as it happens, we will update it if it does happen. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.